What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of AJ Porter Golf and What's the Difference? Another really exciting guest for you this week. I feel really honored to be able to speak with all these great players and knowledgeable people. We have James Collin Davis that's going to be on. Another conversation I really enjoyed. It was very interesting to get an insight into, his experience on the Canadian tour and also, a realistic look into what it looks like to be grinding out there, trying to make your way onto the PGA Tour, real similar to Ryan Sullivan and Christian Heavens. So where we sit right now with what's the difference is we've kind of settled around there is a speed threshold. It's definitely above 170. It's very important to be a good lag putter, and you must have mental, I don't want to say fortitude, but you must meditate as a bare minimum. And then we also talked with Christian and Ryan about the importance of timing. So we're kind of settling in on those four. We dove into all those pieces today with James, but we also dove into a side of golf that not a lot of people talk about, which is the true thoughts and also the mental side of maybe imposter syndromes. It's certainly something a lot of golfers struggle with, especially professional golfers whenever they're first trying to make their way in the world. So this was a really awesome conversation. I love talking about the mental side, and it's definitely going to be a big part of what we focus on moving forward. So I hope you enjoy this video. I know I did. Hold my hand until you turn to ash. All right, welcome back to AJ Porter Golf and another episode of What's the Difference? Really honored to have our guest on today, James Collin. Is it Davis? Davies?
Davis, yeah.
Davis.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
James Collin Davis. He's played all around. He's from Canada, coming to you live from Canada. James, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool, no problem, no problem.
Yeah.
So this is the fourth video in a set of videos where our goal ultimately is to establish a question that I've been asking guys on mini tours or high-level amateurs for years, right? So
Mhm.
it's a fact-finding mission for these golfers out there who want to elevate their game to the next level, whether it's, a sophomore that wants to play Division I golf, a scratch that wants to get to plus, or a mini tour guy who's just really close to that next level, and maybe that one nugget of information from this series is going to be enough to propel them to the next level. So
Sure.
you've
Yeah.
played the past few years on the PGA Tour Canada, an accomplishment several of our viewers, myself included,
Mhm.
are hoping to achieve. We'd like to cover three things with you today: your golf journey and backstory, what you've seen as the difference between each levels you competed in, the next level, and then ultimately what you view as the future of golf. So kind of want to just get it kicked off with, what you're doing today, maybe talk a little about, Monday qualifiers and kind of go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So at the moment, I actually do not have status on any tours. Didn't have status this past season, unfortunately. It didn't have the means to get to a Q school because I'm sure, as somebody in the golf space, they can get quite expensive. Yep. Yeah. And that's probably something that's going to come up again as we talk about this, is that, there's a lot of things that certain skill sets that an individual needs in order to be a successful professional golfer, but you also need the finances. It's just an unfortunate reality. Pardon me. So no status at the moment. Wasn't able to get to Q school this year. And so I just did mini tour stuff this past year, back here up in Canada, in Montreal, so mostly around the province of Quebec and some stuff in Ontario, but with a limited budget, basically just made the most of the money that I had available to me. Plan going forward, I mean, it's winter now. I'm going to be up here most of the winter, kind of make a living teaching while I'm up here and working on my game, obviously all indoors.
Yeah.
Not necessarily ideal, but it is a good space to kind of really drill in the technique of the game. And then next year, the ultimate goal is to get back to the Corn Ferry Tour and PGA Tour qualifiers at the end of the season. Most likely would just do some mini tour stuff throughout the year leading up to that to help me get prepped. I don't foresee myself doing a Latino, or not Latino America, but PGA Tour America's qualifier or anything.
Yeah.
Might try some Monday cues. Depending on proximity to where I live. Basically just grinding, man. Just, you know, doing everything and anything I can to try and help me get to the next level. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the toughest thing and things that people don't realize. So for those out there who don't know, the average Monday qualifier, just entry, like let's say PGA Tour, right?
Yeah.
So I could be wrong, but I want to say first you have to do a pre-qualifier, then you have to do a qualifier.
Yes.
I mean that you're looking if you get through the pre-qualifier, which if you're looking to do it, you're in what about $750 between the pre-qualifier and the qualifier just on entry fees.
Uh, it might not be that high. I can't remember the last time. It's been a couple of years since I tried to get through one, but I think it was like, say it wasn't under 500,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I'm not sure if it was as high as 750. But I
Yeah.
mean,
It's right
still,
in there. Yeah.
yeah, we're still talking a pretty good chunk of change here. Yeah,
And that doesn't include travel. That,
exactly.
that doesn't include food. That doesn't
Yeah,
include gas, lodging, all those sort of things. And
absolutely.
and,
Yeah.
and it's a really tough grind. We had a guest, a buddy of mine, Ryan Sullivan, on
Hmm.
just before here, who just finished up second stage at Q School, and
Yeah.
so his scoring average this year in the Monday qualifiers, I believe, was 68, and he missed 9 times by one shot.
Oh,
Didn't first time in his career he didn't get into a single event. And so you got to imagine, he played whatever 19 or 20 of these things, the amount of money
hmm.
that it takes, and he's playing pretty
Absolutely.
well.
Oh
Like,
yeah, no, I mean, listen, anybody who's got a scoring average of 68 is really golfing their ball, right? But it's how tough those Monday qualifiers are. You really just have to go out and have a day. And like we're talking about, if you're traveling around to try and get through one of these, man, it adds up fast. And really the probability of getting through, I know it's not a math test, obviously. You just got to go out and play some good golf, but the chances are stacked against you,
yeah.
you know.
So
Yeah.
for you personally, whenever you're going into that, and I asked Ryan the same question, and same with Scott Fawcett from Decade,
Hmm.
how do you mentally prepare, right? Because I know for myself personally, whenever I'm going into a 1 day US Open qualifier or a 2 day US Am qualifier or whatever it is, like there's a different mindset, but I almost don't want it to be different. So is it different for
Yeah.
you or
I try to keep it as standard as possible. I used to, when I was a little younger and a little less experienced, go in kind of thinking, all right, one day you got to fire at flags, you got to try and shoot 63 kind of thing.
Yep.
Um, and actually, this is before I started following Decade. That's something that helped me a lot in my career.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, sure, I'd maybe make an extra birdie on the day, but I might also make an extra double bogey on the day. So, the decade system really taught me there's a time and a place.
Yep.
And as much as you need to make as much as you need to make birdies on those days, the bogeys are just like taking you in the wrong direction, right? So there's the combination of, yeah, I got to make birdies, but I got to avoid the bogeys, right? So I try and take pretty much the same approach into any tournament round in that case. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, it's like the old thing with the gym, right? You can't out eat a bad or you can't out train a bad diet. And
absolutely. Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
the same thing that I'm finding. And I actually had a conversation with Scott about the Monday qualifier thing. And,
Hmm.
his biggest thing is the only thing you can really change in strategy is maybe a drivable par four or a par five.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
other than that, and same, hopefully having Chris Nagel on, who's actually based here in town.
Okay.
He's gotten through 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
And I went out and followed him around playing the US Open qualifier, and he said he changes absolutely nothing. So I think
Yeah.
that's interesting for the viewers at home because it's like, I think as a player, you have in the back of your mind, oh, I got to go out and shoot 65, but you can't force your way to a 65. It's the hardest.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, listen, if we could force our way into 65s, we do it every day.
yeah,
It's just not realistic. You just, to long story short, you just got to go play your game. And
yeah,
and it sounds kind of weird to say it, but you just got to kind of hope that it's your day, you know.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So, jumping back here a little bit, I'm based in a colder weather state. I'm in St. Louis,
Hmm.
so I don't have it nearly as bad as you are, but
Yeah,
uh,
still not great though, I guess.
yeah, I'm actually in I'm in Gimme Golf Club right now, which is a
Okay.
my TrackMan simulator place.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about, I know you had posted a video working with a coach. Maybe talk just a little bit about what you're going to do, how you're going to plan out your practice this winter. Because I think, at least for me, it'd be beneficial to maybe I could practice a little bit better.
Sure. Uh, I mean, I do get to practice a lot. I'm like I mentioned previously, I give lessons to make a living here, especially over the winter. So I do spend a lot of time at the indoor center. I usually get at least a couple of hours a day where I can hit balls. You know, we've also got a little indoor chipping and putting area. So obviously something that happened to me in the past over the winters was I would neglect the short game. Even though there's not necessarily a ton I can do, I can always work on fundamentals. And when it comes to chipping, working on hitting a landing spot with different flights and different clubs. Work a lot on putting, but that's more just like start line and really the stroke itself. Can't really work on reading greens or anything like
Yeah.
that. When it comes to ball striking, I mean, obviously, I'm working on everything throughout the bag fairly constantly, but the two things that I really focus on is driver and wedges,
Yep.
because that's really where the game is going. You know, I've done a pretty significant amount of speed training over the last 3, 4 years. I wasn't a very long hitter before that, so I didn't have to hit wedges that often.
Really.
And now
Okay.
I'm hitting the ball significantly further than I used to, and all of a sudden I've got all of these wedge shots in. So my driver game got a lot better, but my wedge game hasn't quite kept pace. So that's definitely a focus for me, specifically this off season, is just get a little bit better at flight control, distance control, you know, hitting the same number with different wedges, trying to give yourself as many options as you can out there.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think that's great, and that's actually a great segue into one of our topics. So I myself am someone, I'm not the longest hitter. I'm longer than I
mhm.
used to be. I'm around 170 ball speed, which
Okay,
people at home think 170, like, oh, it's so fast. I'm like, trust me, dude. You go out with some guy, they're gonna be blowing it by
sure.
you. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, at 170, yeah, for sure, you're gonna have guys blowing it past you, but you're not hitting it short.
yeah.
You know, like, yeah, yeah.
So Scott Fawcett, who was on earlier, basically gave us his big three things that he feel like, someone who's out there grinding that they just must have if they want to take it to the next level. And I want to get your
Hmm.
take on this.
Sure.
Number one is that you must have somewhere in the area of 180 ball speed.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess there's a tolerance when we're saying around 180. You
Yep.
know, for sure. I mean, we see it on the big tour. If somebody's at like 165 ball speed, they're not going to contend as often as somebody who has a 180 or a 180 plus ball
Yep.
speed. And again, going back to exactly what we were just talking about, the 165 versus a 180 ball speed, you got so many more wedges into greens with the 180 ball speed. Wedges or shorter clubs, however you want to say it. Shorter clubs in, better proximity to the hole, better proximity to the hole, you're making more putts. And that's just how guys are scoring these days. So I mean I haven't run the numbers the same way that Scott Fawcett does. I'm sure his data backs that up, but I can't put an exact number on what the ball speed needs to be. But for sure, ball speed, obviously assuming you can control the ball, is nothing but an asset.
Yeah. No, it was interesting because I spoke with Ryan Sullivan and Christian Evans. They were on here just before you,
Hmm.
and they both were like, I don't really feel like it has to be that fast. So kind
Yeah,
of kind of interesting to see, to see all kinds of different opinions on it.
sure.
So
Yeah, and I mean I'd agree. I don't think it has to necessarily be that fast,
yeah,
but I think there's definitely a low end of ball speed where being competitive is just going to make it too tough realistically to overcome.
yeah,
Um, Again, the 180 number is fantastic. I mean, a lot of guys, if they got 180 ball speed, they're probably carrying the ball somewhere around 310.
Mhm.
I mean, that changes a golf course big
It
time.
does, because the thing that annoys me, like we have a big tournament here in town called the Metro Open,
Okay.
and every freaking bunker is like a 295 carry, which
Yeah,
is, if
exactly.
I pure it, that's what I fly a ball. And
Yep.
but like you hit like a little Healy one and then you're in the bunker and it's just like, man, if I could just fly at 310, it's just not even you don't even see
Exactly. And
you
that's,
don't even see it.
yeah, exactly what I was going to say is once you get that 310, 315 carry, it's not just about how much less yardage you have into the green. It's what trouble can you just completely take out of play, whether it's a bunker or, I've seen a number of par fours, some par fives where there might be water that's a 295 carry. And if you got a layup before it, well, you're not going for the green at two. And if you get over it, well, now you got like a mid iron in, so it's just not the same game at that point.
Yep. No, that makes total sense. Next one that he mentioned is something I actually think you do very well, which is excellent lag putting. He
Mhm.
says that you got to be a world-class lag putter.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Now, I guess like you'd say that I'm a good lag putter because some of the stuff you've seen me put up on YouTube, I guess, or
Yeah, just I just
yeah.
watch on the videos. So
So like my YouTube thing, it's really like the last year that I've put stuff out there, that I've really been filming tournament videos and putting them out. If we go back, man, even the year that I had good status on the Canadian tour was 2022. I was a fairly terrible putter compared to now. It was really that winter where I went and worked with a coach and got a putter that was a better fit for me and was able to apply the things that I did well and see some results. Whereas before that, not only was my technique and setup not great, I didn't have the right putter in my hand. And I mean, my putting stats were pretty horrendous. Um, since the changes that I've made, yes, my lag putting did improve greatly, to the point where, like, if I three putt in a tournament these days, I'm like, oh my God, wow, I just three
it's like
putted. Whereas
shocking.
before, yeah, whereas
Yeah,
before it was like, oh yeah, another three putt, like, big difference, big
yeah,
difference when it comes to scoring. Because again, we're talking about just three putts are going to happen. They are part of the game. They are inevitable. But at one point, I felt like I was three putting two or three times around. I mean, how are you going to overcome that? It's you can't hit the ball well enough to overcome just giving away three strokes like that. And so much of that came down to lag putting. It wasn't necessarily that I was missing 2 or 3 foot putts, but I'd have a 40 footer and I'd leave it 4 or 6 feet short or blow it 4 or 6 feet past. Well, anybody who's looked at any kind of data on the make rate of putts from distance, as soon as you get a little further from the hole, that make percentage just plummets,
right.
right? So inevitably you're going to miss more of them. Lag putting is huge. So I completely agree with Scott on that one.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And before we move on from putting, you had in a couple of your videos, maybe people have or haven't seen it, kind of what you work on. And I really liked it with your putting because it's really similar to what I do and how
Sure.
I improve my putting. So maybe if you want to talk a little bit about that.
So you're talking with like the putting mat and
Yeah, like the putting mat, and I think you used I could be wrong, but you had like a training aid that you used, or like to work on start line, you were doing it in the hotel room, right?
oh, right, that
Yeah.
one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do have the Vizio putting mat that Phil Kenyon's, I guess it's his company, it's got his name on it,
Yeah.
puts out there, which to me has been fantastic because it's almost like bringing a coach with you on the road. Like you don't necessarily need somebody there to break down the stroke. That thing is built for the arc of my putting stroke. So if I set up a camera kind of on top of the mat down the line and just film it in slow motion, I can see my stroke like kind of going over the mat. I can see all the different checkpoints. Am I keeping the base square? Am I coming back on my arc? That's fantastic. And then the setup that you were talking about, I just had a laser level um, kind of going over the start line. And I use that not so much for start line, because with the mat, like if you're outdoors, you just stick like two tees into the mat, like a gate drill, right? That's going to tell you if you're starting it online or not. Um, what I use the laser level for is really to make sure that the putter itself is square to my line, right? So I really I've got an Odyssey two ball tour line, I think it's called. So I've got like the two balls in the back with the straight line. And I just want to make sure that the red laser just disappears over the black line. Because that's one thing that historically I struggle with is that from day to day, I can't exactly tell if the putter is square or not. So I just try to use that as often as I can. And to be honest, I haven't been doing it enough recently now that we're talking about it. just to make sure
Always the
that
way
when
it
I'm,
goes.
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's also like it's off season for me now, so I'm not grinding over the putting as much as I normally would.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, I just want to make sure that when I put the putter down, that my eye can recognize when it's square and that I'm not kind of guessing, because that's a terrible feeling, right? You
Yeah.
feel like you're well lined up, but then you put the putter down and you're like, is that pointed left? That's my habit, is it always tends to point a little left. It's really hard to hit a putt with any kind of confidence if you're not sure that the setup's right. You know, same way with a full swing, right? If you're hitting a mid iron into a green and you're not sure that you're aligned properly, man, it's hard to swing with confidence.
Yeah. No, totally agree with all of those things. I think, for me, whenever I really improved my putting, I was like a -3 strokes gained putter around, and
Hmm.
now I'm around a 0
It's
strokes
good
gained.
improvement. Yeah.
And for me, it was two things, right? It was the putting mirror. I was going on a putting mirror every single round, every day,
Yeah.
before, just to make sure that I found the eye position for me where it looked like everything was square, like exactly what you're talking about. And
Yep.
then I just would rehearse that every day. And then I have a training aid called the putting stick that I
It,
just love. And I would
sure.
just force myself to try and break my own record on it. And, simple stuff like that. And just finding, for people out there, finding the things that work for you. Don't
Hmm.
make it complicated and just do it again and again and again.
That's a good point. What you said there is don't make it complicated. Something that I did earlier in my career, whenever something was off, I was constantly like trying to reinvent the wheel, thinking
Same.
like, okay, like my swing's a little off. I got to like rebuild my swing, where
Same.
like maybe my grip was a little bit off or
Yep.
my alignment was a little bit off.
Yep.
You're not completely going to lose your mechanics from day to day, but if a fundamental aspect is off, it can make it seem like you're swinging very poorly.
Yep.
So I've gotten better, and something that I continue to get better at is when things start to go wrong, just go back to basics, right? Make sure the fundamentals are good. And for me with the putting, most of it comes down to my setup. If my setup's off, I'm not going to putt well.
Yep.
If my setup's good, generally I putt well. So,
Could not agree more. I'm
mhm.
exactly in the same camp. I think setup is everything and something that I used to be really lazy on, quite frankly. So
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you just got to be diligent with it, and like you said, even if you like try to do it daily, and this doesn't mean you don't have to spend 2 or 3 hours on it.
yeah.
If we're talking, especially if we're just talking setup, even 15 minutes is better than not doing anything. You
Yep.
know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we're going to go ahead and segue into the third thing that he said is a must. And
Hmm.
the other two agreed on this was meditation. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on meditation, and while we're on the topic of mentality, what else do you do, if anything?
So to start with meditation, completely agree, but have to admit it's not something I do enough of. There have been times in my career where I was a little bit more diligent with it. And if I think back to those times, I was playing much better golf at the time, or at least let's say consistently better golf. I just found myself to be in the right mind frame on a more consistent basis. Um, so something that actually part of my plan for the off season is to get much more serious about meditation. Um, and I mean, a lot of it comes down to, if I think back to the season that I just played, which like overall it was a pretty good year. I did struggle for a couple of months. I got into some bad habits with my swing, but I'm actually working on a video for my channel right now where I recap every tournament, and this really forced me to kind of like deep dive into like, all right, what went well that day, what didn't, and kind of get a big global picture of what happened. And one of the things that I found, and I found this in previous seasons as well, is that I don't necessarily get off to good starts. Not necessarily like making two bogeys in the first four holes kind of thing, but maybe not taking advantage of some early birdie opportunities or birdie holes, I should say. Um, and basically just starting behind the eight ball because it takes me, it's my interpretation of it at least, is that it can take me a few holes to get comfortable. And almost like I can't just like show up on the first tee with the confidence that I need to go out and execute. I have to see myself hit a few good shots before I can really believe that it's there. And that's, especially if you're playing a 1 day event and it takes you 4 holes to get comfortable, well, you only got 14 holes left now,
Mhm.
right? And like we're talking like in that case, it's a 1 day event, but even over a 72 hole event, if it takes you 4 holes every day to get into your groove, that's 16 holes. Like it's a big deal. So I really think that the meditation is something that's going to help me kind of get to the first tee and trust and believe and just go out and play golf, not go and play a little bit scared for the
Yeah.
first few holes while you find your groove. So definitely something that I'm going to be concentrating on much more in this off season. So again, I got to agree with Scott. I agree with a lot of what Scott says, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I
A
found the
lot of people
decade system,
do.
yeah, I mean it's hard to argue with his stats, man. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the best players in the world are using his stuff, so it makes sense. So
absolutely.
I'd
Yeah,
like to dive in a little bit on that and just bring in my own personal experience. But I have a friend of mine who it's not so much like meditation, but it's more so manifestation along with
sure.
like he calls it visualization, so feeling and
Yep.
visualization.
Yeah.
So I didn't believe in it and I thought it was total garbage. I was like, there's manifestation, such a dumb thing.
Hmm.
This year, I started trying to do it towards the latter half of my season, and I shot, I don't know, I think I shot like 69, 72, 75, 66, 65, 69, 70 after I started
Okay.
doing
Yeah.
it. And my scoring average before that was like 75, and then my scoring
Okay.
average
Yeah.
dropped to like 70 and a half or something
Sure.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious if you'll be implementing that into what you're doing, or if you thought about that at all, because there's almost like what he had me doing was like envisioning myself making 103 footers and
Hmm.
feeling and playing through the rounds in my head and feeling it and like trying to really embody it before I would go play and
Yeah.
then try and then go play. So I don't know what your
Sure.
thoughts are on that.
I mean, I love the idea of it.
Yeah,
Because I think even if you can put yourself in that situation when you're not in that situation, right? If you can visualize the moment, really make it as realistic as possible, then once you're in that moment, it's not foreign territory anymore,
yeah,
right? And you're just kind of like, all right, I've been here before, even if I physically haven't been here before, kind of thing. Um, so yes, definitely something that I'd like to integrate into the mental work that I do as well as the meditation. Yeah.
yeah. And I think there's like really, as I'm finding, and Ryan Sullivan mentioned this too, that he does both parts, like you said. So I'm kind of
Hmm.
finding that, you know, people are doing both and it's a critical part. So
Yeah.
seems like we're kind of in alignment with, those three items. What would you say, in your opinion, are maybe something that we're missing? Ryan and Christian both mentioned timing as being a really big thing, playing well at the right time.
Yeah.
Kind of your thoughts on maybe some things that we haven't thought about or missing to kind of add to the list to talk about.
I mean, I have to second that more, I guess third them saying timing if two guys have already said it.
Yeah,
Um, it definitely is a big deal. I've had some good opportunities in the past where, I had some decent financial backing and it just wasn't the right time for me. I kind of hadn't learned some of the lessons that I've learned since then. And I really feel that if I was put back into that situation, that the results would have been considerably different. Um, but also, like you said, just being hot at the right time. You know, whether it's U.S. Open qualifier or Canadian Open qualifier. I mean, even if you just like get into the event, maybe you don't do great in the event itself, but what that can do for you
yeah,
in terms the experience, but also the exposure that it gets you. You know, you let's say if I qualify for the Canadian Open next year, regardless of how I do in that tournament, that can completely change my career in terms of the support that I get afterwards or before, right? So yeah, timing is a huge deal, and we've seen so many stories in the past of guys who just got hot at the right time. Um, maybe somebody who's Monday qualified for an event. It doesn't happen often, but a Monday qualifier that goes through and wins or
yeah,
whatever it might be, and then like you just ride that wave afterwards, you know. So yeah, the timing's huge. In terms of another piece, I mean, we've talked about well, we've talked about Scott's three keys. We've talked, quite a bit about the mental side. I mean, I can't understate the importance of the mental side because I mean, I've played professional golf for 7 years now, I think. Um, been around a lot of good players, a lot of players from of varying abilities, but definitely a lot of good players. Um, and there's so many guys out there who have the gifts physically to hit all the shots that you need to hit, but there's a select few who can kind of go out and do it and just like they don't seem like they're overthinking it. It's just what they do. To
Yeah.
me, that's all about the mental side, right? It's um this kind of calmness in your head and just a firm belief that you can do what it is that you need to do, right? And then that's something that I've struggled with on and off. I didn't take a normal route to professional golf. And there's times where I'll still be out on the course and I'm like, how did I get here? Like, am I supposed to be here? Do like almost an imposter syndrome, if you
Yeah.
will, right?
Get that.
And like if you're trying to overcome something like that, it's an uphill battle for sure. Um, so yeah, mental side to me, I mean, I know people are talking about it more and more. I still don't think it gets enough attention, right? Because it is such, big cliche, but it's a mental game. It really is, and it's something that I talk to my clients about all the time. I work with a lot of people who they've played other sports, whether soccer, tennis, hockey, you name it, and like I just worked with a guy today who plays a lot of hockey, and we were trying to create a parallel between the golf swing and a slap shot in hockey, just to try and get it moving a different way. And
Yeah.
he was like, okay, he's like, but like why can I hit a slap shot and why do I struggle so much, getting my path a little more from the inside kind of thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, when you're hitting a slap shot in the middle of a game, how much time do you have to think about it? He's like, I don't. I'm like, that's exactly it. You can stand over that golf ball for 3 minutes thinking about what you need to do and just get in your own way. Like you got to kind of like get installed and just go, man.
Yeah.
So um yeah, in terms of other things that we're missing, I can't really pinpoint one specific thing.
Finances are a thing that gets
Finances are
brought
definitely
up
a thing.
as well.
Yes,
Finances
absolutely.
are definitely a thing that gets brought up,
Yeah.
just from my other guests as well.
Yes. Yes. And I mean they're completely right for sure. I know some guys who they've got all the means in the world when it comes to finances, whether it be, maybe they come from a wealthy family or they've just been lucky in finding some support. They just don't really have like they've got the skills, but they might not have the drive to do the work that they
Yeah.
need to do to get to the next level. And then you've got
Yeah.
other guys who they also have the skills and they have the drive, but they just don't have the means to do it.
Yeah.
And I've seen a bit of both sides of that. Whereas like right now I'm like I've got a couple of small sponsors, but we're not talking about, large sums of money here. It's just a little bit to kind of help me get going at the beginning of the season.
Sure.
Um, so I have to like, I'm still like I'm giving lessons throughout the summer. Well, like listen, I don't want it like this isn't a pity party. I like my life is
No, but
fine, like
yeah.
I do
Sure.
live a pretty good life, but every day that I'm teaching for 4 or 5 hours, well, that's 4 or 5 hours that I could be spending working on my own game,
Yep.
right? So you got to try and
Totally.
like manage your time extremely well and practice smarter because you don't have as much time to grind. Whereas at one point I did have some good financial backing for a short period of time, and I was able to just like commit myself to, you know, basically treating my game like it was a full-time job. And it
Yeah.
was awesome.
Yeah.
It was great. And obviously my game got better because I
Yeah.
just was 100% dedicated to the craft.
Yeah. I think I'd like to backpedal a little bit because I
Sure.
think it's really interesting the imposter syndrome thing you brought up
Yep.
because or just questioning, why I'm here, how I got here, if I should still be doing this. Because
Hmm.
Ryan, who I brought up earlier, who had that 68 scoring average, he talked
Yep.
about battling with that and even, similar thing with the finances. I mean, he was like, look, man, I'm playing phenomenal golf and I just see my bank account go down and down and down and down. And it's those two things are such a difficult thing. And even like myself, right? Like,
Hmm.
I got my first win here on our we have some phenomenal players in St. Louis, believe it or not. I got my
Sure.
first win on the amateur series. I play with these guys all the time. I can beat some of them, but I was still, in these tournaments thinking like, do I really belong here? Like, should I be
Yeah.
playing here? Like, there's no way that I can win or whatever. And it's amazing to me after I visualized it and saw it so many times and then finally got over the hurdle, like the way it just flips. I can't
Sure.
describe it. So I don't know if, maybe talk a little bit about that, but I just think it's really interesting that, you brought that up. I definitely think that's something that I've gone through and had to
Hmm.
actively work on, and Ryan brought it up too.
Sure. So I guess I'll go back. I'll give some context. I mentioned that I didn't take a normal route to
Yeah,
professional golf. So I mean, I played as a teenager. I got into the game when I was about 13, 14.
same,
Um,
same.
Played like got pretty decent as a junior. I think the lowest I got was like a 3. But at 18, I basically just stopped playing. Like I didn't go to college for golf. I don't come from a golfing family. And I think if I'd had somebody around me to not necessarily push me, but guide me a little bit, I probably could have got, or at least been close to getting a scholarship to go to college, play some golf. Probably not D1, but regardless.
Yeah,
Um,
doesn't matter.
yeah, scholarship's a scholarship, right? Um, so at 18, I basically like just put the clubs aside. I mean, I'd play maybe 2 or 3 times a year, just like go out with my dad, maybe a round or two with some friends, but those rounds were more about beer than golf.
Sure.
Um, it wasn't until I was in my mid to late 20s that the company I was working for, they kind of like they found out that I'd played golf when I was younger and they started sending me to some of these like corporate tournaments just to go and represent the company. And that was kind of like my reintroduction to golf, where I realized that I was like, hey, I can still swing it pretty good. Like I've got some decent speed. I can get it out there. And man, I like this a lot more than I like my office job. So that's what got the kind of hamster wheel going. And then,
Sure.
a couple of years later, ended up leaving my job, played 2 years as an amateur, and just kind of struggled financially through those couple of years. And then turned pro at the age of 30. And like I'll be perfectly honest, I wasn't ready. Like my game wasn't ready to play at the pro level when I
Yeah.
was 30. I hadn't developed nearly enough. I'd only been back at it for a couple of years. Um, but I needed to start making some money. So
Yep.
got a job in the golf industry, basically played in tournaments on my days off. And all of a sudden I'm surrounded by these guys on the local tours out here who these guys all played junior golf together. They probably went through the college system playing on the same team or against each other, and now they've just moved on to the pro ranks. And I'm like just this kind of outsider who didn't really know where I fit. And there's a bit of an odd, I guess, situation up here where like the province I'm from is a primarily French-speaking province, though my native tongue is English.
Yeah.
But we're in close proximity to Ontario, which is primarily English speaking. So we get a lot of guys from Ontario who come to the events in Quebec and vice versa. But that first year, it's like the guys from Quebec, from my own province, just like didn't know who I was. And, I sound English, so they weren't really sure where I belonged. But then the guys from Ontario, they were like, wait, you're from here, but you don't sound like you're from here. Like so just like didn't know where I fit in, you know. Um, and anyways, like long story short, like not just that first year, for multiple years, and still at times now, there's still times where I'm out there, or like when I was playing PGA Tour Canada, where I was like, man, like, do I belong here? Like, am I supposed to be here? And I don't know where the thought comes from, because like if you're playing on PGA Tour Canada, like I went to Q school, I earned status. I had
Yeah, you
every right to
belong.
be there,
You
you
belong.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just like it just didn't sink in for whatever reason. And I've talked to um a couple of sports psychologists about that.
Yeah.
And uh the work I've done with sports psychologists definitely has helped in terms of managing myself on the golf course. managing the emotions, not getting too high, not getting too low, all that kind of stuff. But none of them are really able to help me with the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Like I had one sports psychologist who, I mean, he was fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but when it came to um the imposter syndrome, like we'd done a 3 or 4 hours of theory together, and then we went out onto the course and played 9 holes. And at the end of the day, he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "about the imposter syndrome." He's like, "I don't really know what to tell you except that I just saw you play 9 holes and like, dude, you can play." I was like, "Okay, that's great, but I'm not sure that's gonna, you
Oh,
know,
that's not gonna do anything. It
yeah, I don't
doesn't.
think that's enough.
It,
I think that's where the meditation is going to come in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get back to, the meditation, and I honestly think the manifestation, because for
Yes,
me personally, what's helped me get over it, I'm not saying I'm over it, but like what's
sure.
helped me like trend towards getting over it
Yeah.
is the manifestation. And but
Hmm.
also like Scott mentioned, what the goal of meditation is, right? It's not to have
Yes.
no thoughts. It's
Yes.
to recognize, and actually Carl Morris talks about this too. He has a great podcast, The Brain Booster.
Hmm.
Um, he talks about understanding that your brain's job is to generate thoughts, and
Yeah.
it's your job to decide what to do with them. And so you can understand that as being, oh, that's a crazy thought, right? And then just move it to the side. And that's why you
Sure.
you meditate, because it's one of those things where it's like, maybe people understand this that are out there that play competitive golf, but like you could have Tiger Woods himself come up to you and say you're a phenomenal player, but if you don't believe it in your heart and know it
Yep.
yourself, it doesn't freaking matter. When you get out there under the gun, like it just doesn't matter. So
Yep.
maybe that's, one of the key things that we can add to the list is self-belief. Um,
I now that we're talking about it, I think that definitely should be on the list because
yeah,
you could have all the other assets that we've talked about, but if you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to get anywhere.
doesn't matter.
And that's not just in golf, that's just in life.
That's life. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
And now going back to the meditation, just want to throw this in there because when I was meditating, like even when I was meditating, I can't say that I'm some like meditation expert. Whenever I was doing it, I was doing kind of like following like a guided meditation.
Yeah.
Um, and what I found, something my older sister had actually pointed me towards, um, was it's called Yoga Nidra. I don't know if you've heard of it, if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
But I basically just found a 20-minute guided yoga nidra session on YouTube,
Okay.
where it's just about focusing on your breathing and then focusing on different parts of the body and repeating a positive uh, self-talk or self-thought, I guess, a few times throughout it. And this is basically what I was doing at the time. So to anybody who's maybe, let's say, a little scared to start the meditation because they don't know where to begin, this was a great foot in the door for me. So highly recommend that if you're just looking to get into the meditation. I'm probably going to go do it after this, actually, now that we're talking
I
about
think
it.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it was great. Yeah.
he always talks about the Sam Harris's Waking Up app. He says it's a requirement.
Yes.
He says he won't work with players unless they have it and do it. So
Yeah, see, I think that's the one aspect of Decade that I never got into. Everything else I basically like just followed it by the book,
yeah,
except that meditation. I don't
same,
actually.
same.
Yeah.
I've only started towards the latter part of this year actually believing that the mind matters. I'm like, no, I can just get my physical skills to be so
Yeah.
good it doesn't even matter. And
That's
how
the thing. I thought the same way for a long time.
yeah,
Yeah.
how ignorant
Until I
that is
realized
to
that I was
me.
like, man, I'm working my butt off and I feel like I'm getting better, but my scores aren't getting any better.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know? Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we'll pivot now just
Sure.
to, kind of talk about your YouTube channel a little bit. Actually, maybe
Hmm.
we should go and just summarize that because that was a lot of information. So, um,
Sure.
just from the list, 180-ish ball speed. You need to have a
Yeah.
certain level of speed. There's a bit of a range there. Let's call it 173 to 185 is,
Sure. Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
a
I think
range.
that's pretty fair because even at around 173, you can carry the ball 300.
Yeah.
Obviously you need pretty optimized launch conditions, but I think it 300 plus carry to
Yep.
me is would be
Yep.
the threshold for me, not necessarily a ball speed, let's say.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Next thing, lag putting. I think everybody totally agrees.
Yeah. Oh
Lag
yeah.
putting is super important.
Yes. Yeah.
mental side, not only meditation, but a little bit of, maybe manifestation, and then also
Hmm.
the self-belief side of
Yep.
things. And then the last part is the funding slash timing. So those are
Yeah.
kind of, five pillars that we'll be talking about going forward in
Hmm.
future episodes. I'm seeing enough of a common theme to go ahead and add them to the list. You're the
Sure.
person to
Yeah.
say it, so we're gonna add them.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
Perfect. One of the things that I'd like to highlight with your YouTube channel that's been growing a lot lately, at least it's been showing like that to me,
Hmm.
is your matches with Boo Weekly. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, but I mean, what was that
Absolutely.
like, man?
Uh, long, like one word, awesome.
Yeah,
Uh, Boo is he is one of one. He's an incredible character, such a nice human being. You literally could not meet a nicer person. Plus, he's got the sense of humor and he's so charismatic and not to mention a pretty damn good golfer. So I mean, I just got kind of lucky. Guess it was winter of 2023. I was down in Florida, and it was really the first time I'd had a chance to spend an extended period of time down south over the winter, not just getting away to Orlando for a week and cramming, 10 rounds of golf in kind of thing.
yeah,
So I had a friend of mine who'd moved down to Pensacola, and his mom had somewhere I could stay. So I went down there, just like, budget living like you do with
yeah,
as a touring pro. Um, and was lucky enough that two courses down there basically gave me free access while I was there. Play and practice as much as you want, which was incredible.
yeah,
Um, and at one of these courses, at the time, Boo was practicing out of there and playing there a few times a week. So one of the guys that I'd gotten to know down there, there was a day I think we were on like the 17th green and he was on I guess it's the 12th green, which are very close to each other. And he was like, "Oh yeah, there's Boo. He's right over there. I'll introduce you." So he introduced me, and then we ended up playing in a money game together. So then I started talking to him a bit more, got his
yeah,
number, basically just played in a bunch of money games together, practiced together a couple of times. Started to develop a bit of a friendship. Um, and then I was back down there, oh, when was this? Last fall. So I'd been to first stage Q school, which unfortunately went terribly. I really struggle on grainy greens because we're just
ah,
not used to that up here.
mm,
And I had my first stage in like West Palm Beach area, and the grain on this course just ate me alive. Anyways, that's a completely different story, getting off track. Anyways, I went back to Pensacola after Q school, and you know, I had some conversations with Boo, and he was trying to like point me in the direction of how I could figure things out financially. And, he wanted to do something to kind of help me on my way. And after not getting through stage one, I actually didn't know if I was going to compete again. I'd hit such a low
yeah,
that I really like for a little while felt like my playing career was over and I was just going to like basically just focus on teaching the rest of my life kind of thing. Um, and but this is when I decided that I was really going to take the YouTube channel a lot more seriously.
yeah,
So in one of these conversations with Boo, trying to figure out how he could help me, I was like, listen, like the way that you could help me is if we filmed a match on camera and I could post it to my channel because it's something that could help this grow. One of the ultimate goals of why I started the channel was to find, you know, long-term sustainability financially through it. I mean, that's
yeah,
going to take time to get, but if I can not have to look for sponsors and just kind of pay for my tournament fees through the YouTube money, that's fantastic. And anyways, he agreed. So we set a date, and I mean, this was like the most basic production ever. It was 18 holes filmed on an iPhone, no microphones, nothing. Um, but I mean, it worked out. We had a great match. We probably had about 40 something people following us around because I'd kind of advertised it a little bit. So we had some
yeah,
atmosphere, somebody makes a putt and the crowd goes wild kind of thing. So
yeah.
that was great. Um, I ended up beating him last year. We had a great match. I won 2-1. But that kind of set up the rematch for this year because
Yep.
obviously he wants
Wants his
revenge.
revenge. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So we just filmed that just a few weeks ago. Well, when we're recording this, part one went up last week.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, man, we've just had a lot of fun doing those. and he's so happy to get out there and do it. We did it this year also to raise money for the first T Gulf Coast. Because, I mean, why not? We're not charging people an entry fee to come and watch this thing. We just ask that they make a small donation, and the YouTube channel, I'm suggesting people do the same thing for their local
Yeah.
first tee or an equivalent program.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So in that match, I mean, just to get back to the question, like,
Hmm.
what's the difference, right? Like you hit it probably 40 yards by him, most of it from what I can see.
Yeah, I'd say
Sometimes
on average
30.
25, 30 past
Yeah.
him probably on average.
His wedges really impressed me. Like his wedges were very impressive, at least in the most recent one. Like his wedges are pretty money. So
Yeah,
in your
so I
opinion,
mean
what's the difference?
he's a ball striker.
Yeah.
Like, he's a little bit older, so he's not hitting it as far as he used to. But man, does he ever strike it solid. It's like the guy literally gets upset when he misses fairways. I get upset if the ball's not playable, right? Like there's just a difference there, right? Like
Yeah.
if I'm in the rough, I'm like, that's fine, whatever.
Yeah.
He's in the rough and he's like, I'm like, really? Like, oh my God, you're like a foot into the rough. And he's like, no, it's not good enough. It's like, I don't like the rough. It's no fun. Okay. So there's a difference in mentality there. But I mean, his ball striking is on another level than mine. Um, and a lot of it really, like, I don't think there's a shot that he hits that I can't hit, but it's the consistency with which he does it.
Yeah.
There's just not many big misses
Yeah.
whatsoever. Uh, Boo's problem historically, and like I don't want to sound like I'm throwing him under the bus. He'd be the first one to say this as well. It's always been his putting
Okay.
was
Yeah.
was really what he struggled with. And I mean that was evident to me the first time we played um in the winter of 23 when I was down in Pensacola. Uh he hit 16 greens in regulation and shot 73. Yeah. Now, I mean, one of the greens he'd missed, he put a ball in the water and made double, but still, it was like
Sure.
could
Yeah.
have gone stupid low and just, couldn't find the hole to save his life.
Yeah.
Like I joked with him at one point that when we were playing match play, I was more worried if he was just off the green chipping than if he had a putter in his hand. Because he
Yeah.
chips in a lot. His short game, and this is something I could never figure out. His short game around the greens, his touch around the greens is so good. And then he just put the putter in his hand, and it was just like it was a myth to me how the short game could be so good and the putting could be so quote unquote poor.
Gotta
Um,
wonder if that's here or if
so
it's
so that came up in the match that we played this year in part two because he putted so much better this year than the previous year. Now he basically played a full season on the Champions Tour this past season. He didn't have status. He got in through sponsors exemptions, but played in a quite a number of events.
yeah.
Um, because I mean, who's not going to give Boo Weekly a sponsors exemption?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you want Boo Weekly in the field.
Hmm.
And it was I mean, he had a decent year considering he hasn't toured full time in 4 or 5 years because
Yeah.
of some injury issues and whatever. Um, but in the match this year, we're on the back nine. He drops another putt on me, and I'm like, man, like your putting is so much better than last year. Like, and he's like, oh yeah, I worked on it really hard, and like the technique is better. And he admitted he's like last year when we played and throughout this year, he's like, I was still kind of had the jitters. Like
Yeah.
he told me he
Sure.
missed during the Champions Tour season, he missed like 6 putts from like a foot because he was just so nervous,
Yeah.
you know. So then, we talked very briefly about it. But it's just about like having a few things to rely on and just take your mind off of the things that are worrying you, right? But man, if he can putt consistently, not even great, but just slightly above average, oh God, it'd be hard to beat. Because like when he hits the ball, man, it just sounds different.
Yeah. Yeah.
He hits an iron shot and it sounds like a gunshot. It's unbelievable. And like I've always been a pretty good ball striker, but I watch him hit the ball and I'm like, okay, that's next level.
That's different. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed, I watch every single one of your videos,
Thank you. Appreciate
but
that.
yeah, they're really interesting. I like seeing all the tournament rounds, like the good and the
Hmm.
bad. Like I think that's one thing that you do well is whether you, at least to my knowledge, whether you play well or not play well, you put it out there, you talk about the round, you talk about what your thoughts are. And I think a lot of people can really learn from that when they understand, kind of what's in the mind, as we're finding
Sure.
it's super important. So
So little story just about the YouTube channel because it kind of relates to something we were talking about earlier,
yeah.
where it all came from. 'Cause, I mean, technically the channel's been there for I don't even know how many years, but a number of years, but I wasn't actively posting on it.
Mhm.
Um, it was I guess just last year. Yeah, June of 2023, where I really got serious about starting to repost some stuff, not with any kind of regularity. That didn't really happen until after I didn't get through stage one last fall.
Yeah.
Um, but I just had my PJ Tour Canada Q school out in British Columbia, and it was a just a crazy week. Like I was getting out there about a week before the event just to like play the course and get ready while the airline loses my clubs. So 2 or 3 days without my golf clubs. So now I'm in BC. I'm living like 4 minutes away from the golf course, but I can't really do much. So I was like, I'd borrowed a putter from the head pro and I'd walk with a group and just like hit some putts out on the course, but I wasn't about to like start hitting with rental clubs or anything because just didn't want to mess up my timing or anything.
Sure.
Anyways, the bag finally shows up, so I get into my prep and I was playing some very, very good golf at the time. Again, this is after the first winter where I'd been able to be down south for an extended period of time. So I'd had essentially the longest season. Like I'd basically been playing a full calendar year for the first time in my life instead
Yeah.
of that, you pick it back up again in April or May, hitting off
Yep.
of grass and you rebuild a little
Yep.
bit. I
Yep.
was going into the season with a ton of momentum. I just played PGA Tour Canada the year before. It hadn't gone great, but I learned a lot. Technically, I was in a better spot. I'd started studying the decade system. Like I really felt I was like, okay, last year, great, we got status, but wasn't able to do much with it. I'm a better player now. I'm better mentally. I'm more prepared. I've actually got a game plan on the golf course. Let's go get status again and do some damage this year. 2 days before Q school starts, I injured my neck. So I spend the weekend before the tournament starts basically just getting like 2 or 3 treatments a day trying to get it back. Again,
That is something.
that costs money.
Sure.
Um, and I play through the event um, in a significant amount of pain. I start off okay. I go 69, 69. I think I'm like tied for fourth or fifth after 2 days. But the third and fourth rounds, my body just couldn't take it anymore
Yeah.
and just like kept falling down the leaderboard. Ended up missing conditional status by one shot. Now, even if I'd been one shot better, it's not like I would have gotten any starts, but conditional status goes a long way,
Does.
a really long
Yes, it
way.
does. Yep.
So that one stroke, I mean, man, what a difference that could have made. I mean, cheaper
Mhm.
Monday qualifiers. Um, I would have had an extra year of not having to go through pre-qualifying. There's
Yep.
just so many advantages to having that status, even if it doesn't get you starts. Now, my coach at the time, he was out there, he'd caddied for me at the event, and obviously that night we're both just beat up, right? And like we're not saying much, and we just kind of like had some food and went and crashed. And the next morning we're having coffee, and I was like, dude, we should have had a camera crew here following this week. Like it would have been like a almost like a full swing kind of thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
so much happened. Like the storytelling would have been incredible.
Yep.
The emotional ups and downs of it. So we talked about like the logistics of like, all right, that's I used to work in broadcast television.
All right.
It's
Okay.
like, like, would you know anybody who would produce it and this and that? And I just kind of like kept finding these speed bumps that would get in the way. And at that point, I was just like, screw it, man, I'll do it myself.
Yep.
I'm gonna get the YouTube channel going again, and let's really show the ups and downs. Because you're right, I have not filmed a tournament round that I haven't posted, right? Every tournament round that I film goes up because it's not all, you know, rainbows and unicorns and
Yep.
whatever, man. Like we see a lot of the good stuff on TV, but the guys, every week that you're watching a tour event, well, you're not even seeing the entire field broadcast on television on the weekend. and we completely forget about the other half of the field that missed the cut.
Right.
None of that stuff is covered. And I mean, like it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard way to make a living. And I figured this is an opportunity to kind of really show people, even if it's not PGA Tour level at this point, just the ins and outs of what it is to try and get there.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So,
No, I
yeah.
think people really like that. It's kind of the same vein for me, right? Is to do the same thing. I work full time right now.
Yeah,
Unfortunately can't play full time as I would
sure.
like to. And no, I think it's great. I think I really like your channel. So
Appreciate that, man. Thank you.
I
Thank you.
enjoy watching it. So
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you for too long. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Any parting words or anything you want to say before we go, or shout out your sponsors?
Um,
Maybe I forgot to shout mine out. Some Rejuvenation and Strokes Gain Hydration. I don't know if you want to shout out your sponsors.
got Fore Amigos Apparel, foreamigos.com, code JC Davis for JC Davis 15, get you 15% off. I've got what I got? I got Group CG on my hat and the Denis Monette, Société Juridique Denis Monette. It's basically a French way of saying law firm. Um, but yeah, those are my sponsors for now. Always appreciate the support. Um, Parting words. I mean, I feel like listening to some of the things we've talked about. Like, yeah, there's a lot of positives, but a lot of it can seem maybe overwhelming, and that a lot of things have to go your way if you're going to do this. But go for it.
Yeah,
You only live once. You heard my story. I got into it late. If I could get a mulligan on the choices I made at 18, I would definitely have stuck with golf and kind of seen what I could have done um, going through that route at that time. It probably would have been a little easier than the route that I took, but learn from my mistake. Go for it. Go for it when
yeah,
you're young.
yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree. And I think the thing that's so interesting about that is I kind of had the same thing. I didn't start till I was 14. I worked
Hmm.
really hard. I was fortunate to get a golf scholarship to play. And then I ended up, taking a couple years off after college, working full time. And then now I've been back into it. Like, I always kind of say the same thing, like, oh, I wish this path would have happened or whatever else. But it's so funny how it works because I don't think I'd have the same level of mental maturity that I have now in understanding and
Yes.
different things. So it's I feel like it's so easy. I don't mean to get on another tangent, but I feel like it's
No, no,
so
no, that's
easy
fine.
to
Yeah, yeah.
think that.
Yes.
But I also don't think I would be where I am right now. It's the
And
weirdest thing.
I'm absolutely going to second what you're saying
Yeah,
because a firm believer that everything does happen for a reason. I was not supposed to, like, as much as I wish I could have not lost basically 10 years of golf and what essentially would have been my physical prime. Um, there's a reason why that didn't happen. And everything that happened to put me where I am now. And even though, like, yeah, I'm not on the PGA Tour at this point, but pretty happy with where I'm at.
yeah,
Keep
yeah,
striving to get better, but it all happened for a reason.
yep.
So
No, I think that's awesome. I think that's a really good note to end on. So really appreciate your time today, man. I think this was an awesome conversation, and we have a couple more things added to the list. So I think
perfect.
we're in a good place. So I
Again,
think so.
appreciate you having me, man. It
Yeah,
was good to be on. Yeah.
definitely. Cool. All right, thanks.
Cheers, man.